Hello and welcome to Conscious Living. I'm Wendy, Garrett on Empower Radio. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the fact that you chose to tune in today, wherever it is, whatever time it is for you, whether it's dark time, daytime, light time. Any time is always time to learn more, explore, experience, expand your horizons. This is one of my favorite topics. I absolutely love animals. I am not the best animal caretaker. I've had to learn that they each have different personalities, different languages, different ways of expressing themselves, different ways of being. And boy, I hate to say that I'm still learning, but I have to say it because that's the way it is. And it's like with every person, you learn new ways and new nuances, and you just constantly become more aware and grow and expand with that knowing. I love talking with people who've had these incredible encounters and experiences with animals who have become changed by that encounter. Now, this would have been an assumption that these folks that I've talked to before have already had these encounters. But this time it was a bit different. Alan Anderson and Linda Anderson began writing about animals with the series that was talking about angel animals, like angel pets, angel dogs, angel horses. I think they opened a whole can of, from the animal spectrum of angels. And that was a really popular approach to having people share their stories. Alan is here today, and he's going to tell about his own, after, doing all this, his own experience that really rocked his world. A dog named Leaf. Leaf is a rescue, and Leaf has a very, very special role in Alan's life. Hi, Alan. I'm so glad you were able to talk with me. I appreciate being able to read the book and connect again with you, with all of your angel cohorts and companions who are connecting dots.
Hi, Wendy. Well, thank you so much for having me as your guest today.
What was different about this situation? Because, we'll give people who are hearing you for the first time the benefit of your background being a police officer, and with Linda, the two of you came together to create this wonderful endeavor, the Angel Network. What was the beginning, and then how did this, influence you?
Well, Linda and I, we started, we moved to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, after a long number of years in Atlanta, where I worked as a cop, a police officer there. And the reason I got into police work in the first place was because I had gotten a journalism degree, and I was going to be writing, and I was going to work at a television station and weather and do different things, and I had sort of a career path ahead of me. But I had a motorcycle accident of all things, which made me look like Frankenstein for about a year. And I thought, well, I have to use this to my advantage. So after my degree and all that, I went ahead and said, I can get more storylines and more things to write about if I did police work. And then after I got into it, I really loved it. I liked helping people. I liked doing the right thing. I really was able to keep things from getting worse in certain situations. Well, there was one domestic I went to, and there was this little boy on a couch as these adults, so-called adults, were yelling at each other and basically fighting over nonsense. And there was this mutt sitting next to him, brown, tannish dog, medium-sized dog. And those two were just bonded so completely when I came into the apartment. The dog was licking the boy's face and comforting him. The boy was crying. The parents were just totally ignoring their situation or the boy that was sitting there. But the dog was totally focused on that. And I took a snapshot on that, and I said, one day I want to write about that bond and how much better lives would be and how much more human in a good way we would be if we had the love of an animal in our lives, like a dog or a cat or any other type of animal that we could connect with on a very deep spiritual level in moments of crisis and good moments and all the experiences both up and down. Well, I took that snapshot, and I left that apartment. Of course, I did all the appropriate things police do in those situations, and basically everything got back to sort of a norm for them. And I went home, and I sat down on the carpet. It was a long night, and my dog, Prana, which was a beautiful golden, came up to me and just melted next to me as I released all the stress of the night and all the pain and all the suffering I had seen and tried to deal with. And I realized deep in my heart, I've got to let people know about this bond if they don't already know. I need to write about it. Well, years and years later, Linda and I, we were married at the time, but we later, after we moved away from Atlanta and found new jobs, and I was working in computer work, and she was working in seminar-type management. We were walking around one of the lakes in the Twin Cities, and we were walking around with our dog at the time. Her name was Taylor, and she was a beautiful yellow lab, and she grinned, and she loved her walks, and people walked by, and even if they looked like they were having a bad hair day, so to speak, or had challenging times in their lives, they would always smile and lighten up. Their eyes would brighten when they saw her. And we looked at each other and said, we love animals. We love to write. Why don't we spend the rest of our lives sharing these stories in any way we can, whether it be in columns or newsletters or even books one day? And we decided to go ahead and start something and just basically ask people, have you learned spiritual lessons from animals? Have you learned to be a better person when it comes to unconditional love, maybe courage, maybe empathy for others, maybe all the other qualities that make us better human beings because of your association or your love or your connection with an animal in your life? Whether it be a pet or whether it be in nature, somehow, some way, your life is better because of that. We got so many stories. Back then, it was in the mid-'90s. There wasn't really the Internet, so we posted it on bulletin boards at grocery stores and the questions on coffee shops, and people were sending us stories, facts, and, of course, there were some news groups. We'd put some on theirs, too, back then, and we got so many amazing stories of people and how their lives were better because of their pets. They said, I've never been asked this question before, but I had to share it with you, and I knew I could trust that I wouldn't have to deal with ridicule because it's exactly what happened with me and my dog or cat or bird or any other imaginable, or when I was walking in nature and I looked up and I saw this owl. Story after story after story came to us. So we started a printed newsletter called Angel Animals. And we shared these stories, and after a while, it became very much a success. We had thousands of subscribers around the world, and we were sending it out every other month, and people were sharing their stories, and we had so many stories, though we went ahead and created a book proposal, got an agent, and the publishing company wanted to publish a book called Angel Animals, and all the anthology of all the stories, many of the stories that we had collected over the years. And that was our first book. Now, 15 books later, I have a new book called Leaf.
Yeah, 15. Quite the network there.
Oh, it was amazing. I loved it. And from your experience how when something lights up and people are looking for that, up to that point, there was just training books and, how to keep your dog from doing bad things in the house and how to, how to train your cat if that's even possible. There's a lot of books out there, but it had nothing to do with that aspect of it. What the spiritual lesson is that your pet, your animal, that animal companion, that coworker, that partner in life is showing you every single day of your life when you two are together. And when people began recognizing that there was something special about this relationship, why now? Why this point in my life? Why this point in my pup's life or my pet's life are we together? And so often they discover, well, yeah, I was going through this horrible experience, and at that moment I really needed support, and I needed that love, and I needed to know that everything would be okay, and the only way I knew that was because of the love of my dog. You know how that goes sometimes. It just is there in that moment. So
the part that you guys touch on, the emotions that people experience and the depth. It's not just an overview. A lot of the people who share their stories, these are intimate glimpses into real, up close and personal experiences that people, find themselves shifted by. And that's the beauty of your books. I've got, 2 or 3 right in front of me. Angel Cats, Angel Dogs, Angel Horses, and I'm looking on your website at the angelanimals.net with the other ones at how the pets, animals, and the kids who love them, how pets have shaped the lives. I love your story. So I just wanted to interject very quickly, and that wasn't quick, but hey, there you go. But these stories are special.
Oh, they are. And the people are so loving. People who love animals and people that have that as part of their lives somehow there's a light that shines that you sometimes don't see in others that are just go to work every day and they do their thing and they have to complete their task, but there's not that special moment of that amazing connection that you could have with a pet when you come home at night or when you're in need of comfort. And then I would suggest everyone go right to the shelter and adopt immediately.
Well, and the other thing, too, though, is when you do this, you realize how they have come to you. There are pets in my life experience that have come to me, different kinds of pets at different times. One I was told was coming, and I kept getting this. My intuitive experience is lifelong, and this message was, the other is coming. The other is coming. I'm like, okay, what? Yeah, it's like the second coming. What is this, And finally, at work one day, they came in and they said, this German Shepherd needs a home. And I didn't want to be a dog person. I'd always been a cat person. I preferred that. I grew up with a dog. Then the dog died. I was devastated. End of story. Then I had horses and, other animals. Was bitten by a dog, scared to death of German Shepherds because of that trauma. Here's the German Shepherd who needs help. I agree to take the dog home for a week, just, in transition to help another person, doing a favor. And my husband at the time, he says, you're going to keep the dog. Oh, no. This is just me helping. I'm just helping. The dog, when the people who came to drop him off at the house, his name was Max. He was pulling at the leash. We figured out he's about 4-year-old, 5-year-old, very, very strong, muscular German Shepherd, pulling her down the street. And we're both looking at this dog going, uh-oh. So he comes over to me. I take the dog. I said, can I take him for a walk? As her 2 children sit on my porch crying, because one of the children is allergic. That's why they can't keep the dog. This particular family, he went through 5 homes. Anyway, so at that point, he just walked with me, and I said, sit. And he sat. He hadn't bothered to let them know that he was trained. They had no clue he was trained.
Oh, no.
Very, very smart boy. In the meantime, though, there was a reason I had to learn how to become a dog person, and it really changed my life in so many ways. But that particular role was his deal with me, and he ran away about a week later chasing a squirrel, and I was so distraught thinking he was gone. The nightlight came on that particular nightlight, that's the last of its lifespan. It came on at 7 a.m. and he was home the next day. It was saying it's okay, and he had his tail between his legs, walking down the sidewalk. Apparently, he'd escaped from wherever he'd bolted off to, and I'm sure they wanted to keep him. And our agreement from then on was I would walk him twice a day, and he would stay, and it was an amazing transition. But I wasn't ready to be a dog person until I made that a week later agreement. All right, this is between you and me. Needless to say, my little attempt at fostering was unsuccessful. I couldn't give him up. So, yes, certain times in your life, and I wanted to get into why Leaf. What happened with Leaf that was different? Because you'd lost your other dog, and Leaf was a character.
Oh, he was. Oh, I'm just visualizing Max right now. What a beautiful story. I love that. I just love it. The fact that you and him had that agreement, I love that fact. Max, they're so intelligent, and they understand exactly what's going on. And even though sometimes we pretend like we're smarter than they are, we're really equals in many ways when it comes to understanding and awareness, especially when it comes to that bond or that relationship that can develop into something very deep. Wow.
We have to learn how to connect without the words and the language that we use as a crutch in a lot of ways, because we say so many things that are beyond the words, around the words, behind the words, between the words, and the animals don't buy any of that. What we're saying, they buy what our language and our energy is telling them, and they're paying attention. Do you mean what you say? Do you say what you mean? Do you practice what you preach? Who are you? You can't hide from them.
Oh, that is completely, totally true. I love the fact that you said it so beautifully, because Leaf is that way. I mean, he will look at you and he will read you in a sense. He understands exactly what you want and what you're saying. And I can verbalize and I can spread it out into a paragraph, but he does exactly what he needs to do, and he doesn't really need the whole word thing. He can do what he needs to do based on what I asked, and if he decides that that's something he would like to do.
Yeah. The free will component. Is it in my best interest? Maybe.
Well, we let's say, we've been writing books for a long time. We during this process of adopting Leaf and doing all the things we did, we were also writing a rescue book, basically focusing on the Gulf Coast, rescue, saving animals from disaster. And it was a really hard book because we were interviewing all the wonderful people that rushed down there to help the animals and the people, and how traumatic it was down there, the civil unrest, all the lives that were put in danger just to save animals. And they really were noble people because they did a lot, and we were interviewing them. I was talking to them on the phone. We went down to New Orleans and got a good picture of the situation as we were writing. And it was just a beautiful but very hard, emotionally hard book to write. So during this time, we were thinking in terms of, well, maybe we would like to adopt a new pet, because Taylor had been gone for about 4, 5, 6 months, and she was really one of those dogs that just adored me in every single way possible. I mean, she would look at me with such love, and I was the focus of her life, and I really felt lonely when she left. I felt devastated. Everything was grayer. When you lose a dear friend and a dear love, the whole world doesn't have the color it used to have. It gets very gray, and I was very much needing a friend, and in the canine sort, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we went to the shelter, and we went ahead and we started looking. And I thought, well, we're just going to be looking. I'm not going to do anything drastic. And we found Leaf in one of the little kennels.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, it was gone, and he was back, and he just looked like a sort of a piece of black carpet on the floor. He was all curled up. And according to the sign on the door, it had the big bold letters, abandoned. And what the volunteer said, that Leaf was brought in, according to the security cameras, on a motorcycle, a Harley Davidson, and dropped off at the back door with another dog. And so when they brought him in, there was no paperwork. There was nobody there to give any kind of history to the dogs. They named him Harley because of the motorcycle. So that was his name in the shelter. Well, we went ahead and looked and brought him to a little room, and we spent a little time with him. I was very distant, and I was a little concerned because I didn't want to, in my mind, betray the love and the trust of our wonderful yellow lab Taylor. But I did need and did seem to know that this young dog was different. Maybe about a year old, hyper as he can be, jumped around, very scattered, kind of shattered inside. You could tell that he wasn't completely solid as an individual. He was gone through too many traumas. And I started petting him, and I touched him. And I noticed that he stiffened up, and then he relaxed. And I started stroking his back, and he relaxed even further. And I was really surprised because he was, at that point, not liking touch and not liking really to be bothered by people. He wasn't too fond of people. But he allowed me, and he relaxed a little bit, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and, Linda and I, my wife Linda and I were in the room and with a volunteer from the shelter, and we said, well, this is very special. I think we need to go ahead and look at adopting him. And I knew inwardly, and I don't know how I knew, but I knew inwardly, when you're doing something right, you're just doing it right. You know what has to be done. So we went ahead. And at the time, both Linda and I said to each other, we do have to be adults in this way. Why don't we put him on hold? So to speak.
Yeah.
And we'll go home and talk to our cats because they really love Taylor. They used to sleep with Taylor. A lot of times you look for our little cat, Cuddles, and she was always underneath Taylor being warm. I mean, using Taylor as a blanket. And our bird.
Very bonded.
They all really worked together as a very wonderful, loving family. So we went home, and we put a hold on Elise, making sure that he wouldn't be adopted out, and we were going to come back the next day. And we had sort of a family meeting, and we told the cats what our plans were. And, of course, they were all supportive, it seems, in our minds, of adopting the dog because they loved Taylor, and they knew Taylor had a big bark. If anyone came around to the door, they felt safer, and the bird was just watching like we were all crazy, but it was all fun.
The cats thought they were getting another Taylor, so everything would be perfect, no big deal. Yeah,
exactly.
That was their part of the agreement.
They did, and they actually were part of the agreement. I mean, both Speedy and Cuddles were in agreement. And my feel of things, and of course Linda felt the same way, that they were not showing any signs that this would not be a good thing. So we rushed back so he wouldn't have to stay another night, and then got there a few minutes before closing and adopted Taylor. I mean, at the time it was Harley, and then we changed the name to Leaf a little later. So we brought him to our favorite lake that we walked around with Taylor, just so he could get a little exercise and some fresh air. And we saw that he loved rolling around on leaves, and he just loved leaves. He likes chasing them, and we thought, well, maybe Leaf would be a better name. And so I said, Leaf, and he parked right up and came right over. So I think at that point we knew that would be his name, because he responded to that.
Now, you had some anxiety moments, though, because then when you looked up, you did your due diligence after him being with you, the Google Cocker Spaniel, and what did you find out?
Lots of issues.
Surprise!
Now, the responsible person would go home and look up and go to the library, get some books, go to Google, look up the breeds if they were going to do a specific breed, or look up anything in order to get more information about who they're going to be adopting.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we didn't. I mean, we've written how many books, and we should be responsible about that.
I know. Yeah. That's the reality check, is you can write so many books, but when it's your own life, there are things you have to just kind of live through. Mm-hmm. And any reading of any book or any information you get really somehow just flies out the window because it's your experience.
Oh, he was a mess. We brought him home. He was a complete, total mess. He couldn't sleep. He was howling all night. He didn't have any kind of training, bathroom training, or any kind of training where he wouldn't be doing things in the house he ought not to be doing. He was a complete, total, scared little pup of a year-old, and he just didn't know where he was, who he was, what he was doing. Everything was so confusing. He felt like there wasn't a lot of pieces of him were inside of him that were trying to be put together into a solid individual, but he wasn't there yet. So we got herbal remedies. We stayed up at night, taking him out every couple hours. I did, in order for him to learn where the bathroom was and all the other things that people do. And finally, in the morning, he would start falling asleep, and of course we would be up all night, so it would be very
Yes.
So finally, I learned the next night, and this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then after I took him out at noon or at midnight, and then at maybe 2 a.m., I would bring him back into my office, and we would get in my recliner chair, and I would pick him up and hold him to my chest where he could hear my heartbeat. And he would begin to relax. He wouldn't be shaking. He wouldn't be howling. He wouldn't be awake, shivering, or anything like that. He would start to relax, and I could feel that his twitching would slow down a little bit. And I would do something. I would say, Leaf, you are the most beautiful pup in the world, and you're going to be here forever. We love you very much. There's nothing to fear. We're a family. And I would say that. And then in the process, I would chant and sing a word that helps me when I'm in a situation where I needed to have that connection to something deeper, maybe many would call spiritual aspect of oneself. And I would sing very gently the word Hugh, H-U, and I would go, Hugh, Hugh. And it was so beautiful. For me, it was just the most relaxing thing. I would begin to relax, and almost instantly, Leaf began snoring. And I know, oh, good, now it's time for me to get some sleep. But,
lovely.
Oh,
lovely.
I guess hearing the heartbeat and the beautiful sound of the singing of the Hugh, and then of course just knowing that he's safe in my arms and we're both in it together. Him and I had a lot in common. He didn't trust people. People were abusive, I would think, with him the first part of his life, and he didn't like really being around people. I came from 8 years of doing police work in a big city where all I saw was the worst that people had to offer. And I was sort of in the same mindset. I was doing my best to get over it because I know there's many good people and many wonderful experiences that one can have with good people in life. There's no need to have that automatic suspicion of people. So when we were together on that chair, and I was singing Hugh, and we were together as two lost souls in a world where we felt out there was just danger, and there were problems, and people might hurt you. It was like kind of two individuals, like-minded, so to speak, coming together and learning and trying to grow and become, trying to heal together. And it was a sweet, beautiful time where, with that chant and with us understanding each other very deeply, we knew where we were, where we came from, and where we needed to go.
Okay, now we're going to have to take a break, but I want to continue because this is where the story changes. We're talking with Alan Anderson, and A Dog Named Leaf, the Hero from Heaven Who Saved My Life is the name of the book. But you're going to get a prognosis here, a diagnosis, and how Leaf is a very big part of this. But that's going to have to wait till we get into the second part of the show. And it's a good story, so it keeps getting better. And that I loved hearing you sing that, the Hugh. That's what really makes a difference too, is that sound when you're giving somebody some kind of a calming. He brings that back to you later on in the book, but we can't talk about it now. You're listening to Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett on Empower Radio. We'll be back in just a minute or two. Conscious Living on Empower Radio. Hi there, I'm Wendy Garrett. My guest today, Alan Anderson, and the book A Dog Named Leaf, the Hero from Heaven Who Saved My Life. I love hearing that mantra because you do have a beautiful voice, and the way you're singing it, I can imagine would be, to anybody listening, along with the dogs, it's going to be very, very comforting. So with that, you established a resonance, a bond, and a way of giving Leaf a little bit more support. But when the tables are turned now, because you've kind of got him a little bit calmed and getting into a normal, you also address that word normal in the book and how that applies. Your life is about to take a turn for the not quite so predictable.
Right. I mean, it's interesting how things turn around. I was having some dizzy spells, and at the insistence of my wife, Linda, I went to the doctor and got a checkup, and he sent me to a specialist and got some x-rays. And, of course, I thought it was an inner ear infection or something that causes dizziness. But, being responsible, and I like the word responsible sometimes, I went ahead and got a checkup and made sure everything was okay. And, of course, it went away, and I was fine. But I got a call in the office one day. I was at work and got a call, and it was from the doctor that did the test, the x-ray. And he said, Alan, you have, after I realized who he was, he said, you have an unruptured brain aneurysm. And I thought to myself, no, I don't. I don't know what he's talking about. I guess I was sort of in shock. I said, well, where is it? And he said, well, it's in your brain. That's why it's called a brain aneurysm. But I was just in shock. I've been healthy, really basically healthy, and very much relying on my brain for virtually anything I wanted to do, and I couldn't have anything. He said that it was about an inch within the frontal lobe of the brain, and it was. He kind of told me where it was, and gave me a few other specifics, and we talked a little bit. Gave me the name and number of a specialist that would be able to do brain surgery, as he said so, which kind of put me into more shock. And I had a reaction. I went out for a few minutes in the hallway. It was sort of a slow day in the building, and there was not too much going on. We were on the higher floor of one of the office building. And I started thinking. I thought of my father, who had a stroke at a young age, and how he was disabled and always had to have help doing almost everything. And thought about all the people I met in police work that had brain damage and were disabled in some way. Now, I'm not saying in any way that people with brain damage can't lead fulfilling and wonderful lives and they have every possible experience that they could possibly have, because sometimes that's what individuals need to have in life. But for me, at that point, it was something to fear, to have something happen where I was not completely capable of doing everything I need to do to take care of myself and have any kind of things that might happen that would cause me not to be fully functional. Well, of course, I had a reaction to it, and I went back to the office, and I was thinking, well, if I had this emotional reaction to it, how would Linda react? Because that's the one thing I cannot handle, and I don't know if it's a male thing or if it's just me, but when she has an emotional reaction, it's just like I need to keep her from having that reaction. So I was thinking, well, I'm going to go ahead and look it up, go to Google, find out more about this, do research, which I didn't do on Cocker Spaniels prior to the adoption, but I went ahead and went to Google and did research, and of course everything was even worse than what the doctor said when it came to the options and what happens with people in their, even after successful stories, surgeries, how they go ahead and have problems for a lot of their lives. Well, I did something that is, to me, the most logical thing in the world. I wrote up a fact sheet for my wife to read about this situation we were now in. And I called it, the possibility of a surgical procedure, and it was, basically made it as very non-threatening as possible. And I went home that night and I gave it to her. And of course, Leaf was sitting there with me and watching, and I gave it to her and she read it. And the first thing she said, I wanted to see what would Spock do. And I had to go and find something that would give facts and statistics and all the success stories, anything that would allow her not to have an emotional reaction, because that was like the most important thing in the world to me. I don't know why. Are men just kind of not there sometimes when it comes to emotion?
I'm not going to get into that one.
Okay.
I'm not going to get into that one.
Is that a flaw?
Yeah, you gave her a memo, basically.
I gave her.
And how did she respond? This is the big thing. What was her response to that? Because Leaf, I'm sure, was taking notes.
Oh yeah, she said, you have a brain aneurysm. You're gonna have brain surgery, and you gave me a memo, and she just couldn't believe that I would. And it was really well prepared, beautiful in every way. I put a lot of work into it, mm-hmm. And so we sat and we talked, and I held her hand, and we talked about all of our efforts and all that we were doing, and how this could really be very hard on both of us, especially if something happened where the surgery wasn't all it needed to be. But we went ahead and started making plans and did all the things we needed to do. Now, as we were going through this process, of course, Leaf was with us the whole time, but he was listening. He was there. He felt the emotion. He knew that something like this massive dark cloud was entering in our lives at that point. But he also was very special in sticking with me and always being with me and always being there on my lap or doing whatever needed to be done in order for me to feel his comfort and his love for me. And it felt so good to see that. I remember through this whole process of getting tests and going to see the doctor, one night I had this terrible, terrible dream. It's a nightmare. And he played such a key role in it. I was in a place where there was this massive structure, and all these people, thousands and thousands of people lined up, maybe 10, going back miles and miles, couldn't see the end of the line, all these people going into this structure, this massive structure. And I overheard that this was the building of life. It was like one of those vivid dreams that sometimes we have, and it was so real. And all these people were going in there, and in the building there was these massive libraries and forests and all the experiences people can have, oceans. It was just basically life, and it was represented in this building. And everyone that was going in there had a ticket. And I was the only one that didn't have a ticket. I was devastated. I looked in the line. I saw my wife. I saw our dear friends. I saw family and other people I knew, and they were all rushing into the building, no one even looking back to see that I was there. I didn't even exist anymore because I didn't have a ticket or I wasn't in line. So I went down and tried to get into the line without a ticket, and people were looking at me and they were staring at me and they were saying, "You don't have a ticket. You don't belong here. You're not one of us anymore." And I left, and I was devastated. And I woke up in a sweat. And of all the things, even with Leaf not liking to be touched so much, he jumped up and let me hold him and pet his fur and pet his face and he was there with me during that, after this nightmare. Well, I told Linda about the dream later on in the morning. She woke up and we went out and went to our dining area, or living room, actually the living room. We had some coffee there, and Leaf was laying there looking at us as I was telling her about the dream. And I expressed, and I held up my hand. I said, the one thing I did not have, I went through the whole dream, is I did not have a ticket. And in my mind, of course, I saw a ticket I didn't have. It was a piece of paper. Later on in the day, Leaf went ahead and started doing something he had never done before. He would go over to the living room table and push off the magazines and newspapers. And he'd start ripping them up into shreds, into pieces of paper, little pieces of paper. He'd pick them up in his mouth, and Linda and I were just surprised. This was another bad thing that he was doing. And he'd come over to me and drop them at my feet. And I was so out of it at that point, I didn't really understand what he was trying to do, but he would do that over and over again. And finally, I had to pick up all the magazines and put them up higher so he wouldn't be able to get them. But he was trying to deliver something very special and something that I really wanted and something that I didn't have when I told Linda about the dream and my reaction to it. And he was trying to deliver me that piece of paper, that ticket. He must have understood in his doggy way what happened.
See, that is what I think is so brilliant. The behavior, he hadn't done it before, nothing like that. And all of a sudden he develops this new, very, very definite behavior of getting things, tearing them up, grabbing a piece of that and handing it to you. It's brilliant.
Oh, it was so special and beautiful. And you know how, you know from your work and how these animals understand so much more than we give them credit for, and even in the visual aspects of it, not necessarily the words, but the visuals that came along with my describing what happened in the dream.
See, for me, my animals have been with me in the dream plane too. So this isn't, it's that thing of, even though I may be sleeping in the body and my pet is in another room, I've experienced instances where we have been connected and they knew exactly what was going on. So it's just so neat that you are able to make this connection. And now when you go into the hospital and you're having to have all this done, Leaf is doing his own thing and with Linda, and it's very clear that you guys are a unit. It isn't just This is a family. Yes.
Yeah, Leaf was very, I went into the hospital. Of course, we were going through all of our ups and downs and through the process, and through this whole process also it's interesting, the symptoms for the dizziness went away, and the brain aneurysm that had not yet been ruptured was discovered. And then through the process of having tests done, a blood clot directly aimed for my heart was discovered based on something that really was not a symptom. It was just a test. So it was kind of interesting how a healthy person found two life-threatening elements to him that could happen at any moment without warning, and they were averted because of circumstances that were beyond my control, getting certain tests done at certain times, doing all that I needed to do in order to get this brain situation taken care of.
Yeah, basically a totally disassociated anomaly.
Exactly.
I was like, surprise! Oh, by the way, you might want to check this one out because it is important. The other one's just cosmetic. This is really important. And it is. That's the way it works. That's the way it works. Had to get you in there one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, with Leaf, though, the thing you start in the beginning, with his trauma, you took him to go see, I like this because this is a two-parter, and I was left hanging at the beginning about the grooming, because you got a dog before you hadn't had the same kind of grooming issue, even with a golden, because they do blow coat and all that good stuff. But he, having a traumatized background, wasn't thrilled to go to the groomer. And so at the very beginning, you leave it very open-ended that the first groomer they went to wasn't pleasant. You decided to switch to one who'd been working with dogs for 30 years. And then it's like all of a sudden there's a hidden piece of the puzzle, which you find the answer to at the end of the book with this groomer. I love the connection that you made and the information she adds to the table.
Oh, I was in shock. I went to interview her before the book to get more information about that transition when he first came to now. And I thought she would say, well, he was scared and he was a little shaky, but he got used to it. She just told me a horror story where they would dread that he would be coming that day. And he was a biter. And he was urinating all over everything, and he was scared, and he was vicious, and he was all the things that we never knew.
He was basically a basket case of trauma.
Yes. Basket. He was, and Patty was, and told me, and they would, after about the third time, she was thinking, well, we really can't continue this. I really would like to help, and I know that these are good people, and they would keep him, and they would make sure that he is safe for the rest of his life, but I can't continue doing this. And then she's driving around one day and saw Linda walking Leaf, and she reached down and petted him and kissed him, and Patty knew at that point that there was a good dog inside of that scared dog that comes to the groomer. So she decided not to tell us, which is something that she was concerned that we might not keep Leaf, even though I already told him he was there forever, no matter what. And then she began, as the months went by, he began trusting her more and more, and their relationship now is just like best pals. But for about a year, she went through complete, total chaos and hell when it came to trying to groom Leaf. It took about twice the amount of time because she'd have to negotiate. Okay.
Every single maneuver. Yeah.
Now, this is what we're going to do now with your foot. Is that okay?
Yeah. But see, to me, that's a person who really, really does love animals and is able to take it to the next level of, okay, let me empathize. Let me feel your pain. Let's have a contract. Can we proceed? And it takes that patience. It takes that heart connection, the core of willing to be on, instead of a time frame that you think is going to, in 3 visits, we'll have this dog, eating out of our hands. In 3 months, they were close to the hand.
Yes.
But see, it's on that level that they connect of not trying to superimpose or bully or coerce or in any way, shape, or form manipulate. It's just a way of, okay, who are we working with and how can we make this happen? And being willing to just go through it instead of around it. That's, I think, is a huge piece of the puzzle here that helps people understand everything you went through. And it was a good thing you didn't know, because a lot of times people attach their dog's behavior as an extension of their own personality, and it was an extension of his, not yours.
Yeah, she's a perfect example of unconditional love. She was going to do what needed to be done in order to gain his trust, and she would see as the year progressed, he would snap, and then he would lick, and then he would go back to being the good Leaf that he was always meant to be, and not the fearful one that was caused by his upbringing.
Part of it's like almost, when people have a schizophrenic personality or personality disorder where something triggers a behavior, a response, and it's almost, it's a psychological disconnect where they are triggered and they can't help that. It's an impulse, it's gone, it's out before you know it, and she really had to work with kid gloves to figure out how to get around his issues, that prior trauma, wherever it came from.
Certainly did. And she's not a meek personality. She's very strong, and she handles big dogs. She does a lot of work, and she has a good, strong voice. So it's not something that maybe would come natural. What comes natural to her is respecting each individual animal, and that's what the best part of it was. I mean, she respected Leaf for who he was at that point, and there was a slow growth in trust, and he saw in her someone that he could befriend and wasn't trying to hurt him, even though his automatic instincts often were to protect himself and take care of himself in situations that he was not familiar with.
Okay, for everybody who might have overheard a bit of the first part of the interview and not really paid attention, can you do that Hugh mantra again?
Oh yeah, well let me give you an example. Leaf and I were in the car, and I was going through a lot. I was just going through. I just couldn't handle anymore. I had my head was hurting. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was driving down the road, and all of a sudden, I had a car swing in front of me. And in the car, I had a CD in the CD player on the car, and I often pushed a button that allowed me to hear this beautiful sound of Hugh in order to relax me. But I had forgotten to do that today, so I started going into some sort of what do you call it, rage or car or driver's rage or whatever.
Yeah, road rage.
Yeah, road rage. And so Leaf jumped in the front seat. Didn't cower in the back, which I might have expected him to do because of how men are, and sometimes his past but he came to the front seat, and just without even thinking, he pushed his paw on the main button, causing the CD to start. And all of a sudden, this vehicle was filled with huge
Made a difference, didn't it?
It did. I calmed down. He looked at me. He started licking my cheek. He was treating me like a small child that needed to be taken care of. So I took him home. We both took a long nap. He had a wonderful treat when we got home. But he did exactly what needed to be done at exactly the moment where it really would have made a difference. And he was a vehicle in some way for that special something that we all have inside of us. And I loved the fact that he was there for me at that moment, with that beautiful song, the Hugh song, the H.U. Hugh song.
He knew what it was about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing, when you're in the operating room and you speak about seeing a thing that did give you some a soothing or a calm was the presence of the lights in the corner. And you also had a presence of Leaf.
Right. When you're in a crisis situation, I think this goes for a lot of people. We just tend to ignore it. There's sometimes that blending maybe of something that's spiritual in your life, and you see it in the form of maybe blue or white or different lighting sparkles sometimes. And for me, when I see that, I know things are going to be okay. And then as I was going into the operating room and I was thinking about Leaf and our life together, and I was talking to the guy who was doing all the prep work about his dog and the fact that his son had adopted a dog, and he ended up keeping the dog, but it made him and his son closer, and how special that dog was. And I talked about our angel animals and angel dogs a little bit, and he just knew exactly what we were talking about. So I was rolled into the surgery room for brain surgery, and I saw Leaf on my inner screen, and I as the little device was coming down to the nose cover to put me to sleep, I saw him that he held a little piece of paper in his mouth, just like he did when he was tearing up all that paper in our living room, and bringing it over to me. And he came over to me and he dropped it, and I reached out in my mind's eye and I picked it up, and I realized at that moment that I had my ticket to life, and that everything was going to be okay. And my nose was covered, and I went to sleep knowing in my heart that it was all going to be okay. He delivered me my ticket to life.
Okay, now then Leaf almost checks out here.
Yeah,
it's just like you guys just dovetail everything. It's amazing how similar your life paths are.
Yeah, he had always had stomach problems, always had problems with elimination, and we kept on trying different foods, and we were doing our best to keep him healthy. And he had a really bad bout where he just couldn't even walk. He was so weak. He was dehydrated. He had diarrhea, and I rushed him to the vet, and finally they diagnosed pancreatitis. And they gave him all the appropriate medication. They gave him liquids. They did everything they could, and he began looking better and feeling better. And we brought him home, but it was really a close call. It was to the point where you don't fool around with that. You really have to do everything you can to make sure that they have all they need from a veterinarian to heal, especially from that type of disease. It was scary. It was very scary. We were both traumatized by it. We've been back and forth to the vet because of other dietary issues. We thought not the right kind of food. He was not having good, was not able to do all the things that dogs do when it comes to elimination in a healthy way. So this time we discovered what it was, and he's had one bout after that, and rushed to the vet, took care of it, and for the most part he's healthy and happy and running and playing, but occasionally that particular disease comes back.
But he does have the healthy regimen of dog treats now.
Yes.
Instead of the Kong-filled, like a person going for the cheesecake.
And cheesecake is so good for both us and dogs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Now, the last thing I do want to mention, there is a wonderful piece of information for people who have any kind of incredible bout a health issue, a traumatic, life-threatening health issue, you guys did something, and you had some support about going to the hospital ahead of time and just getting an idea where you would be recuperating, recovering. And there was a little checklist you went through to help you acclimate yourself to the staff and the environment prior to going in for the surgery. I think that's one of the most helpful pieces in this book when in addressing these life-threatening health issues, and people are, fearful of going to the hospital. They don't know anybody. They're all strangers. This was, I think, a very good coping method.
Not only coping, but and especially for your listeners, if anyone has a time when they are going to the hospital for any surgery, go ahead of time. See where the surgery is going to take place. Talk to the head nurse or the person in charge of nursing. Have them do a tour of those places that you'll be at. Let the people that are going to be taking care of you after surgery meet you. See you as a fully functioning human being so they see what you are and will be after the surgery when they complete their work of making sure you're healed in a safe and clean environment. I mean, the whole thing is that make yourself into a human being for the people that see only. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a huge. It's a wonderful piece of information in there. It's in the middle of the book if you're going to be reading it. A dog named Leaf, the hero from heaven who saved my life. So basically, you came out of this a changed person with a new mission. Absolutely, and the mission is a simple one. Share this. Don't hold back. Don't fear ridicule. Don't have all those things that make you keep from doing that which is important to you and your mission in life. And my mission is to share this story, as I've shared so many other people's stories in Angel Animals. My wife, Linda, and I have worked so closely together over the years to do that. And now my job and my mission is to share how special Leaf is and how important it is for that spiritual partnership, nothing less than that, to make in his life grow. We both of us grew and became better in who we are as individuals and more spiritual and more compassionate, more loving because of being spiritual partners as we went through life, through these experiences. Well, and that part of it is huge because you recognize your partners. This isn't a servant. This isn't, a tool for you to access some other, part of the house. Bring me the newspaper or that kind of thing. It's a being who happens to have a different body, but a very, very capable mind and a beautiful soul. And if we open ourselves to that, then we become changed as human beings, and you begin to do more work to connect the dots about other animals and other relationships. Oh, absolutely. So for people who are really interested in connecting dots and seeing how this works in your own life, please check out the angelanimals.net, Angel Animals Network with Alan and Linda Anderson. Alan, thank you so much. I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm glad that Leaf has a happy ending. He's still living. Oh, he is. As are you. Oh, we both are alive and well and having a really wonderful life. Okay, he's also very photogenic. You can check him out on the cover of the book. He's a doll. Yeah, maybe a carpet in some pictures, but not this one. He's got that fabulous face with a great smile. And looking forward to, I'm sure, lots more of exciting excursions with you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett. This is Empower Radio.